Right, I would like to call to order the meeting of the Special Committee for the Transition to 14 Wards. Madam Clerk, if you could please call the roll.
Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Vaccaro.
Present.
Alderwoman Ingracia.
Present.
Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Bosley. Alderwoman Middlebrook.
Present.
Alderwoman Rice.
Present.
Alderman Todd.
Present.
Alderman Page. Alderman Stevens.
Here.
Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Here.
Alderman Grass. Alderman Grass. Alderwoman Walker.
Present.
President Green.
Present.
Alderwoman Davis. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Page.
Present.
Alderman Grass. We have 10 present. We have a quorum.
Quorum being present, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the Thursday, January 5th, 2023 committee meeting.
So motioned.
Seconded.
Was moved by the Alderman from the 12th, seconded by the Alderman from the 23rd, that we approve the minutes from January 5th, 2023. Madam Clerk, if you could please call the roll.
Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Vaccaro.
Aye.
Alderwoman Gracia.
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Bosley. Alderwoman Middlebrook.
Aye.
Alderwoman Rice.
Aye.
Alderman Todd.
Aye.
Alderman Page. Alderman Stevens.
Aye.
Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Aye.
Alderman Grass. Alderwoman Walker.
Aye.
President Green.
Aye.
Alderwoman Davis. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Bosley.
Aye.
Alderman Page. Alderman Grass. We have 10 aye votes.
Great. For today's discussion, I am going to turn it over to our subcommittee on Ward Capital, who will kick us off on their research and their findings. And then after that, we'll take some public testimony and then come back to committee members for any thoughts after we've seen both the work of the subcommittee and taken those public comments. So who from the subcommittee on Ward Capital would like to kick it off? All right.
Is Alderwoman Boyd in? I think she was the chair.
Yeah.
Alderwoman Boyd is not going to make it. She sent, I think, a report to Christina, and I had one correction for the support for the report. I'm sorry, but I need 1 second.
Madam Walker, CJ Walker, I'm sorry, Madam Walker, could you, are you gonna do it then?
Yes, sir, Jesse. Madam President, members of the committee, we met and we talked about Ward Capital. We had Rich, I think Hanley, I can't remember his last name. He was there.
Bradley.
Bradley, thank you. Of course, we asked a lot of questions. We basically came up with that we had concerns with what happens to Ward Capital when the incoming alderperson does not come back the next session. And we talked about making sure that we had a fair and equitable distribution of ward capital. And one of the concerns was that ward capital not be divided equally, but that we do a needs assessment to find out which wards had the most needs and be able to skew more money in that direction for a certain period of time to try to bring all wards up equally to look as nice for everybody. And that was basically it.
All right. Was there conversations regarding if we are to change the makeup of ward capital, does that need to go back to a public vote?
No conversation on that.
Okay. And what about, we know that some ward capital accounts have very little money on them. Some are sitting on, almost several $1 million that have not been allocated to specific projects. Was there a recommendation from BPS on how to, address the balances that are in people's, I guess, accounts that have not been designated to certain projects?
We did have that conversation, but the conversation skewed toward most of that money being earmarked toward projects that are a year or 2 years old and never have been done, not a shovel having hit the ground. So most of that money is earmarked. It just haven't been used because streets and whoever else haven't enacted their process in order to make the projects happen. So yes, that's what we spoke about.
Was there any recommendation from the committee going forward on ward capital? Any recommendations that the committee is making?
No, ma'am. We have a couple of more people that we're going to sit down with, and I can't remember who, so forgive me for that. I don't have those notes in front of me. Was not expecting to be talking this morning. But we have a couple of more people that we need to sit down with to get more information. And after we get through with that, then we'll have a recommendation.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Are there, I think we'll go ahead into public comment and then go over to committee members for thoughts and suggestions kind of going forward for the working group. Let me get my speakers list up here. All right, the first person I have is Gwen Cogshell.
Oh, no. Oh, good morning. My name is Gwendolyn Cockshell. I live in the now.
Sorry, I'm
Hold on.
sorry. She would have to be sworn
Yes.
in.
Okay.
Hold on one second. Do you, if you could raise your right hand, please. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, you may proceed.
Okay. My name is Gwendolyn Cockshell. I live in the old 26th ward, which now is the 10th ward. And I think I've been living here for over 50 years, and I think Ms. Walker addressed what I'm concerned about, and that's the distribution of monies. And we inherited a little of the 28th ward, which is the ward that Lyda Cruson lives in. We inherited a little of the 18th ward, where it's been a lot of development is being done by Rankin. And I'm in the ward that's closest to what we call the land that time has forgotten. And I know that the people that represent persons like in the 28th ward or the old 28th ward or the rest of the city would be concerned about taking all the money and putting it in places like Ms. Walker was said that's needed, because everybody that pays taxes wants to be represented. But if you look at the city of St. Louis, that has not happened in decades and centuries. in the city of St. Louis on the city's north side. If you walk down the city north side, you would see that some of the sidewalks are starting to look like mud. There's no sidewalks, they're turning into mud, starting to actually look like East St. Louis. So my concern is how the money is going to be distributed. And also the fact that what we need to really look at, I'm concerned with all this money coming in St. Louis, and it's been like giving it away to certain people like of low income. But if you really look at all the federal dollars that's coming down, some of these people haven't paid mortgage and rent in over 2 or 3 years. Some of these people have gotten increases on food stamps into the thousands. So we sit up and we start giving money away. You know, the best you know, that's a problem with me, because the best program we had to me was something like Darlene Green had, where we loan people low interest rate loans. We couldn't get loans from banks like myself when my furnace went out and I didn't have $11,000. So I say we had good programs that we could use this money for, where the city can recoup that money back instead of giving it away. We're gonna become like a welfare state. But the last thing I want to talk about is the fact that Spire is tearing up all the streets in the city of St. Louis. They said that they were supposed to dig these holes and replace these meters. And then Lyda Krewson, when she was in office, had said that she was going to pave all these streets. Well, I know it costs $20,000 for our street to get paved. And I know that I don't know how much money we're going to get, you know, with all these. I don't know if it's going to be $1 million, because it's like 3 wards we're getting. So I don't know how this money is going to be divided up. But I know that from Martin Luther King to Page, from Goodfellas to Kings Highway, it's like I said, no development, nothing's being done in these areas. And so if we were worrying about taxation without representation, the north side would be that, where the median income is $32,000. So I think if we want to bring this city up, we're going to have to start looking at bringing North St. Louis up, because my grandbaby is 9 years old and she did a video that says, where is my tax dollars going? So if you don't think that this anger is building up when you start taking away schools and these food deserts, if you don't think young people are looking at this and this doesn't infuse them when they go up and start tearing up stuff, you gotta, you need to rethink that. So I'm concerned with Spire tearing up these streets, and they're constantly putting these potholes in these streets. Like I told them prior, I had to pay $680 for my car to be repaired. I repaired it myself, but this year moving forward, if they don't address it, I will be sending these this bill to the city of St. Louis. So I'm concerned about the have and the have-nots, and we're gonna have to start looking at it, or this city is gonna steady decline. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for your testimony. Next up is Charles Bryson. Thought I saw him. All right. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President, and members of the Special Committee on the Transition to 14 Wards. I thank you for allowing me to speak today. TrailNet once again goes on record requesting either the elimination of ward capital or a very equitable distribution methodology. From the report given by Alderwoman Walker earlier in this session, things seem to be moving along the right track. Although, having been in government, I will tell you, this discussion about ward capital takes people aback, because no one wants to offend a sitting or a future alderperson. So I think that conversation must be taken into consideration. If funds are not already allocated for a project, I think TrailNet would suggest that it be allocated back to the Streets Department as of July 1st. I think that's an equitable way of doing it. TrailNet also strongly recommends that all changes be made in this aldermanic session. The reasons are, it allows the budget division to make the necessary changes in their budget assumptions to give to the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, which, as we all know, really begins the budget process. It allows the Streets Department to begin to properly plan for the upcoming fiscal year and beyond. And it removes the debate around ward capital from the upcoming aldermanic races. TrailNet encourages you to break with the short-lived history and very inequitable distribution of ward capital for the betterment of our city. Again, my thanks.
Thank you very much. Next up is Kay Wilson.
Hi, it's Kia Wilson. Thank you, though.
Yeah. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
May proceed.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Kia Wilson. I am for now a 6th Ward resident, soon to be in the 7th. And I'm also an advocacy journalist who speaks and writes about traffic safety issues nationally. And what I know from the work that I do is that the cities that have been most successful at saving lives on our roads do things very differently than we do here in St. Louis. And we have a real opportunity as part of the ward capital reallocation process to follow their lead. And in my opinion, we should be centralizing the money we currently divide amongst the wards and systematically, in a data-driven process, prioritizing it to areas where people are being killed and injured the most. For a little bit of background on that, I think there's actually a couple of intertwined goals boiled into that. First, the cities that we should be emulating have universally committed to 2 interrelated things: a Vision Zero goal, which is the goal to end car crash deaths and serious injuries, and second, a safe systems approach, which says that we can achieve that goal through systemic policies. This is not a fringe idea. US DOT actually adopted these 2 things as our federal framework a year ago. But what sets really good Vision Zero cities apart is that they do not think of traffic violence as random or as simply something that bad motorists do because they are bad people making bad choices, but as the consequence of policy choices that we as a society fail to keep people safe. So first, we badly need to adopt a Vision Zero goal. And in order to do that, we need to follow the lead of other cities in getting a little bit obsessive about citywide data, which is sort of different than how we do things under the ward capital system now. Great Vision Zero cities are obsessed with data about car crashes, where they happen, when they happen, who is disproportionately involved in them, and which systemic factors drive those trends. And there are very clear trends. They make that data readily available and easy to understand to the public, at the minimum with an annual citywide traffic study, which is something that I think we need very strongly and is not well served under the existing ward capital system. Third, Great Vision Zero cities use all that information to make proactive, data-driven, citywide decision about how to save lives, particularly with regards to where crashes happen, because folks in my field know that an unsafe built environment is the single greatest predictor of whether someone will be injured or killed in a car crash. So if 45% of pedestrian fatalities happen on just 6 roads, which is happened in St. Louis in 2021, we would put the money towards those roads to fix them rather than spreading those dollars across 24 or 14 wards. Car crashes are not distributed equally amongst our wards, and to equitably address them, the money we spend on infrastructure and other interventions shouldn't be either. So to sum up, everything I've learned in my 10 years as a reporter and a speaker focusing on this issue tells me that we need a data-driven, programmatic response to car crashes in our region, that those efforts need to be led by our most qualified professionals in our streets department, ideally, in my opinion. And we need to give them the money they need to make urgent changes now, rather than dividing it up amongst the wards and putting alders who are already working really hard in the unenviable position of having to save up for interventions that we need today. People are dying in our city in inequitable ways, and in other cities they are being saved, and we cannot wait.
All right, our last speaker is Cindy Mentz.
Yes, I'm here.
Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President and members of the Special Committee on Ward Reduction. I appreciate the time you're allowing me to present. My name is Cindy Mentz. I'm the CEO at TrailNet. As Charles stated, we are the region's nonprofit dedicated to safe streets for all. And we believe that our streets can be places that connect people to each other and their community. As we've been discussing on ward capital, our city lacks a unified, focused, and appropriately funded approach to making the streets safer for everyone. The current system of distributing ward capital limits the city's ability to respond to the needs of our community, or as Kia Wilson just said, the urgent needs of our community. And we can see the result of our present system with the impacts on the physical, economic, cultural, and social environments of our neighborhoods. For generations and continuing today, the distribution of ward capital has limited access to resources and access to opportunity for our Black and Brown communities, especially on the north side. The evidence is in plain sight, just as stated by Ms. Cogshell. When you walk, drive on the north side neighborhoods, you can see a patchwork of missing, deteriorated sidewalks, maybe even mud, and also small piecemeal approaches to street improvements. We also see it in the traffic violence experienced in the north side wards when compared to other wards and documented in TrailNet's crash report and East-West Gateway's equity analysis of crashes. I think we can all agree that all St. Louisans deserve safe access to public streets, not in a block by block or a ward by ward approach, but citywide and based on need, similar to as Alderman Walker's comments on supporting the use of a need-based approach. So TrailNet supports this elimination of ward capital and redirecting the funds to the streets department so it can be used equitably and on a need-first basis. By restoring the funding into one bucket, it will allow for intentional planning. And I know it sounds repetitive, but there is a stark difference for the streets department between being directed to fund projects one at a time by 28 different priorities for a current year, compared to having a predictable revenue stream to support strategic long-term goals to meet the requirements for creating a robust transportation system that can safely support all modes and all users. And most importantly, these consolidated funds can support the long-term implementation of the mayor's upcoming comprehensive street study. And also, the street study will support a Vision Zero approach as outlined by Kia Wilson. So I want to thank you for allowing me this time to present. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our public testimony. Alderwoman Walker did say she had a few more things to add to the committee debrief from previously. So I'm going to go back to her first before we go through members of the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. The discussion was on ward reduction. We'll look at regarding distribution of the dollars of the project, and it was discussed to speak with Lou Golly regarding a 0.5% tax ordinance. And one of the questions that needed to be answered was, does the ordinance specify how many wards and how will it look due to the new boundaries? It is estimated that each ward will be getting an estimate of maybe $650,000 versus the old amount that we get. It was also asked, how would the project move forward after the election, which I hit on before. And Rich Bradley explained that a project that had been approved already for an alderman could not be stopped by a new alderperson. So even though he said that, I know that's not factual because I know my personal experience. The committee will look to see if the ordinance must be amended and send it back or to put it back on the ballot. They will take a look at that, or we will take a look at that. Mr. Bradley did show that BPS departments has a process in place to ensure that wards will be funded, even if we have not made decisions or finalized the discussion that we're having. It is a recommendation of the committee that we proceed on these meetings past March the 23rd, because it's still going to be things that have not been settled, and that this not be rushed. Felt like it should have been done a long time ago, so we need to take our time and do it right versus rushing to try to get it done before the election. The committee also spoke about the distribution, and I pointed that out earlier about the need to do a needs assessment versus just equally distributing money. And it also recommended, and this is what you asked me and I didn't answer, Madam President, that any excess of the dollars go to the Capital Committee Fund. And it also stated that the administration is looking at ward capital and things that the aldermen should not have to pay for out of their ward capital. So that might change. So that concludes me. Thank you, guys. Sorry, but I did find my notes and I wanted to give you what I missed before.
All right, thank you. At this time, I will go through members of the committee. Don't think Alderwoman Davis is here. Alderman Vaccaro.
Yeah, so I can tell you right now, the voters voted on that half-cent sales tax back when Freeman Bosley Jr. was the mayor. And it's very specific how that ward capital is divided. And we can't just, I'll just warn, we can't come in and say, well, the voters voted on this and we're going to ignore that. You're also haven't discussed the city works money, which also the voters voted on, which is equally divided up amongst wards. I believe if you're going to make changes, it's going to have to go to a ballot. But for the aldermen or any group to say, gee, we're going to ignore what the voters voted on, then how do we, first off, we can't. It'll end up in court. Just like anytime we do anything that we're not supposed to, it just ends up in court. But to ignore what the voters voted on also sends a large distrust in the next tax issue you put on the ballot saying, well, we'd like everybody to vote for this. This is where the money's going. And then to come along and say, well, we're going to ignore that. So I'm just warning that, and I don't know the fix. I do believe it has to go back on a ballot. I do believe it is divided amongst the 28 wards equally on the money collected. I've argued in the past, they've also basically threw that aside and used it to balance the budget with during lean times and didn't give the wards the ward capital they should, which actually has gone into why some of the areas look a little worse than they do when the ward capital was basically used to balance the budget. There's plenty of money right now that can be used to fix areas north, south, west, east that are in dire need of fixing. I believe that. But you have to still follow what you put on a ballot. Otherwise, why even have a ballot? Let's just do what we want to do. You can't. And I guarantee if we mess with this ward capital, it'll end up in court because we can't. My suggestion, we got elections coming up. We should be focused on getting something on the ballot as to how this ward capital gets spent, or if it's eliminated, I mean, you also have that very large chance that somebody will sue and say you're misusing these funds or not using them in the intent that was on the ballot, and ballot language is very specific. They could say you can't legally collect this, and then we all lose. So I'm just saying that we can't just do what we want to do. Anyway, that's just my only comment, and I would caution against just saying, well, as the alderman now will ignore the will of the people. That's, I mean, that's just, you can't do that. That's like as if we got somebody elected and we said, well, we just don't think that person should be elected, so we won't swear them in because we didn't like that. It's not what we wanted. We cannot ignore the will of the people. This was a vote. If we're going to change it, it needs to go back on the ballot. And that's just my only comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderwoman Ingracia.
Just quickly wanted to thank the members of the public who came to speak before us today, taking time out of their schedules, and also appreciate the members of this committee who have started to dig into this important issue. I don't have anything further. Thanks.
Okay. Alderman Bosley. might not be available. Alderwoman Middlebrook,
I have no comments. Thank you.
Alderwoman Rice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So it looks like our legal counsel is on the line. I think he said in the chat that he's listed as Clerk Terry Kennedy here. But could we ask if he is able to weigh in on whether or not this is something that would need to go back to the ballot? Lou, is that something that you've been able to take a look into?
Yeah, I'm happy to look into that. The alderman from the 23rd is correct that all taxes need to be voted on by the city residents. But the allocation of ward capital was based on ordinance. I would like to go back and check out the exact ballot language, though, for the tax proposition that the residents voted on.
Okay, I think that's helpful. I think in my experience here as well, I represent a very different geography of the city streets and than some of my colleagues do. Like my ward, the streets in my ward look very different from the streets in the second ward or in the first ward. And so trying to figure out a way to better distribute funds, if they're supposed to be used on infrastructure, then they need to be tied to the infrastructure that exists, not to a political boundary, particularly one that is just so vastly different in size, let alone in need. So, one of the things I do want to be careful with, a lot of the reporting around ward capital for folks who have higher balances still in some of our pockets. I'm one of those. I think there's a couple 100,000. And I'm a little bit unclear as to if that's specifically ward capital or if that also includes what's supposed to be St. Louis Works funds, or things have gotten a little hairy these last couple of years. But trying to ensure that if the intent of the project is to still continue forward, so that be allowed to continue, so we don't actually move money out of ward capital until the project starts, until they've started construction or they've started engineering or something like that. And so if that, even though we have set aside money or we've had a conversation with BPS or with the streets department about the next improvement that we're doing with that money, until that project has started, that money is going to look like it's unallocated. And so just a caution, I know the alderman previous to me in my ward had wanted to do some crosswalk striping, and that when I came in, I was told immediately, like, well, you can move that money if you want to move that money, there's no strings on that. So but that was what he had talked to the constituents about. That's what we've been trying to sort of get that project done in the intervening years. So it may be helpful to have a more thorough conversation with BPS about, if there's something that we need to do to make sure that that money is encumbered. If we have ongoing projects as we're moving out, then great. But then, so it's sort of two pieces. It's what do we do going forward with money in each new budget year, and what do we do with the pocket of money that's left as these wards change over, because the fiscal year doesn't start until July 1. So all of these funds, are there in wards that won't exist after April 18th. So I guess those are sort of my two biggest red flags. I do agree on, thank you, Kia, for coming on. I've followed Kia's work on social media and some of the reports and things that she's done. And, I really think that Vision Zero is something that the city should absolutely adopt. I think we owe it to our residents to be looking to keep as many of them alive as possible. And so whatever it is that we need to do to move in that direction, I would figure out how we can get that going here. So anyway, I guess kind of a lot of thoughts around, but I thank the subcommittee for starting to dig into this. If this is a situation where it may be helpful to have Rich Bradley or our BPS liaisons come on, or, can we ask them to prepare sort of a comprehensive report on what is left, what is sort of encumbered, unofficially encumbered, what is officially encumbered, what is St. Louis Works funding, what is, you know what I mean? Those are sort of bigger questions that I have. And so if we can ask them for that type of a report, kind of ward by ward, I don't know what the feasibility of something like that is. I know that they do give us each quarterly reports. So we have some documents there, and maybe they can just collect all of those. But it, you know, it looks like there's still a lot more information to be gathered, and then processes to be figured out here going forward. So thanks everyone from the public for coming in and testifying again today.
Thank you. Alderman Todd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to reiterate what the Alderwoman from the 22nd Ward said. Over a period of time, north of Delmar has, and especially north of Page, has been neglected in that we had, good example, we had the city openly planning what was called the Team 4 plan, which was to take money from North St. Louis and put it in the Central West End, which I represent, and the South Side. At one time when I was a youth neighborhood worker for the poverty program, the Central West End looked just like any place, one of the most neglected places in South St. Louis. I mean, in North St. Louis. But money was put in there. I remember Westminster in the 4100, that's in the Central West End, for those who don't know, only had one house. The poor house was sitting alone because there were vacant lots all around it. We had the Gaslight Square, which was abandoned. We had, and I could go on and on. Money has been poured in. So people north of Delmar pay taxes too. Everybody pay taxes. Plus, let me be perfectly frank. I'm just speaking about Africans, Black people. Now, because of the fact that we have been paying with labor from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean, didn't get a penny for 250 years. That's $14 trillion. So anybody, there's no freeloader as far as the African American is concerned because of the history of whoever that person is in jail or homeless or whatever. But the point I'm making with sidewalks is this. What has happened is we have LRA. I was trying to get some sidewalks fixed. They don't do it. So the city, unless it's a privately owned sidewalk, they told me they do not repair 50-50 with LRA money, with 50 LRA 50-50 money for LRA sidewalk. On some of the streets of the 18th Ward and south of Page, you got streets, you got huge land mass where they've torn down all kinds of buildings, no sidewalk, people have to walk in the street. So when I say north of Page is north of Delmar, I mean, even, let me be perfectly frank, even on Washington Avenue, Washington Avenue, the alley between Delmar, which is south of Delmar, and Washington. You drive through that alley from Vanderbilt all the way down to Kings Highway, you will see it's just the reality is that wherever you have Africans living or Black people, some of us are called, we are thinking that our tax dollars are not going to benefit us as much as they are people who just didn't come from Africa. Let me be perfectly frank. And we need to we need to find a way to make up for some of the taxes that have been taken from us. And St. Louis was a slave state, so we didn't get a penny for that neither, and we've never gotten equal treatment. So we need to, and we were segregated. It was a segregationist state, we didn't get equal treatment, and it's still not equal. So when we talk about a little change that we pay taxes for and we load the budget with so-called public safety, I think we need to do something, what we can do within the conversation we're having now with these sidewalks, and educate all people, because St. Louis got some good people, but sometimes we need to give them the information And once our good people, black and white in St. Louis, has the best horse anybody ever seen on earth, they would do the right thing. I think what has been missing is that some of us haven't been informing our constituents to the historical neglect, as well as the fact that we need to have one St. Louis. And there's enough money for all of us, but we had to spend this money benefiting the taxpayers. That's the bottom line. And in the most effective and efficient way. And once we do that, there's enough money for North St. Louis, Central West End, and South St. Louis, downtown and out west, which means we call it North St. Louis now, but they used to have a name when I was a kid. That was called out west. It didn't matter whether it was north of Delmar or not. And so we switched it around. And downtown used to be called the downtown south east of Jefferson. But the point I'm making is there's enough money, but right now we need to really use more money north of Delmar due to the neglect. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Page.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, and members of the public. I'd like to say that I sincerely appreciate our existing ward capital program. That does not say that it doesn't need some tweaks and adjustments over time, but I kind of wanted to share a personal experience. Soon after I was elected, I worked very closely with my constituents, both in neighborhood associations and individually, to determine what capital projects meant the most to them. And it probably comes as no surprise that their resounding response was street repair and paving. With that information, I put together what I call my comprehensive street repair and paving plan, where I sought to identify, with input from my neighborhood organizations and individual constituents, the places that needed the most repair. Well, so far, through Ward Capital, I've been able to get some critical infrastructure projects done. I've gotten funds allocated to a critical LED lighting program in downtown west part of my ward that will assist with safety and security. But I have had tremendous challenges in getting street repairs and paving started. So I just wanted to say, and that's one of the reasons why I have not the most ward capital of all of my aldermanic colleagues, but I have a significant amount of ward capital available for allocation because I need to allocate that money to street repairs. I will continue working with the streets department, with BPS, and with other members of the administration to try to get these funds allocated properly to street repair so that we can make our ward drivable and walkable. I've also been able to get some sidewalks repaired through Ward Capital. So the program does work, but I've just got to work harder to get streets repaired and paved in the fabulous 5th/14th Ward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Stevens.
Thank you, Madam President. I do have a few questions. If Miss Kia is still with us, I'd like to, oh, she may have hopped off. That's okay.
I'm here. Hi.
Oh, are you? Oh, hello, hello. Where'd you go? Oh, I scrolled down. I'm so sorry, Miss Kia, Miss Wilson. I'm interested in getting more information from the Vision Zero goal about that project and whatnot. And you said it was part of the U.S. Department of Transportation, that they've adopted it, right? The DOT. Okay, so that should be easy to find. But I was wondering if you had any information, as we were sort of chatting about before the meeting officially launched, on how, say, Kansas City or other comparable cities, not just in Missouri, but in the Midwest, approach streets and traffic safeties, or if you have any sort of directions in which I might rabbit hole myself after this meeting.
Yeah, I think Kansas City is a great rabbit hole to go down. Another one that is fresher in my mind, just because I've been reporting on it recently, is Cincinnati. So Cincinnati has a population not very different from ours. I think it's 309,000. We're actually a little bit more dense than they are, comparable city budgets. Their pedestrian fatalities, I think I wrote this down, in 2021, they had 6 pedestrians die and St. Louis had 20. And they are a city that does centralize, like their equivalent of the Board of Aldermen, their council, is very involved in traffic safety still, though they centralize their funds within a streets department and a Vision Zero coordinator who's funded, they created this position through their recent ARPA fund allocations. But they are doing things like, they had a council person successfully bring forward a bill that created a 5-person dedicated team just to install pedestrian safety improvements. I would say that that's the kind of thing that makes me really excited and I think is really effective. There are other cities, I would say even Denver is an example, that have started to bring forward policies like levying taxes to take the responsibility of sidewalk repair off of the shoulders of both property owners and individual council people, making it like a systematic citywide priority where there is funding dedicated to evaluate sidewalk condition, sidewalk safety, accessibility for people who use assistive devices. Make sure that those things are in compliance with the ADA and what we call PROWAG standards. Happy to send more details about that. And that they are systematically repaired rather than just when somebody is injured, somebody's hurt, somebody is killed. So yeah, there are a lot of examples within the Midwest and also more broadly. And I think we owe it to ourselves to be looking not just within the Midwest, but to any city that has been doing this work for a long time, New York City, DC, though we have very different challenges ahead of us, the strategies themselves are all quite portable, especially when it comes to protecting vulnerable road users, pedestrians, bicyclists, people who ride scooters even, because those strategies are low lift, they are usually don't require special skills and expertise to implement. They just require political will and specifically data-driven centralized decision-making that makes it possible for city governments to say, here's the area of greatest need and here are the funds to address it, basically.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you. I mean, that is so much more than what I was hoping for. So thank you. I got Cincinnati, KCMO, and Denver are sort of most directly comparable, but that other cities, even cities such as New York and so on and so forth. Whoop, someone's cricket phone. It's not necessarily the city, but the portability of the implementation itself in the Vision Zero guide, which Mr. Bryson sent to me. So thank you, Mr. Bryson, for sending that over. Thank you, Ms. Wilson, for further elaborating. And I will drop my email in the chat if you don't mind, or well, if you don't mind me dropping my email in the chat, so that we can continue this conversation. I think that it's worthy and I'm interested in that.
Absolutely.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much. And then regarding, I mean, I think I've been very vocal here at the Board of Aldermen that I do not necessarily support ward capital categorically, right? That is not to say that I don't utilize it or recognize that this is a system that has been in place since before I was born, right? But thank you for your email, Ms. Wilson. You know, I am a firm believer in the separation of public administrators and public elected officials. I think that both protects us and the public administrators when it comes to these things. That said, the voters did vote on it, so I would defer to any referendum piece. I would like to pose a question to either Mr. Galley or anyone here on the committee that might know off the top of their head when the deadline to get ballot initiatives submitted for the April election are, because it has to be 10 weeks before the April general election that we put on a ballot piece, correct?
Correct. It's 10 weeks from the date of the election.
Okay, so what would that be? 10 weeks. So that's coming up relatively soon, isn't it? It'll be sometime in the second week of February or so.
I think it's the last week of January, but I'd have to count back with the calendar.
Okay. I mean, that's easy enough for me to look into as well, but I just wanted to put that out there in case we are considering any ballot initiatives, because that is coming up readily, quite swiftly. And I don't know that we would even have time to get something through the Board of Aldermen to the effect of putting something on the ballot without bridging into that 10 weeks. Is that correct? January 24th, Alderwoman. Okay, Alderwoman Rice put in the chat January 24th. Okay. That said, I am still interested, along with Alderwoman Rice, Alderwoman Walker, and Alderman Vaccaro, on the sort of ballot language back during the 1990 or so election for ward capital, as well as the how it fits within the Hancock Amendment, which requires putting all tax initiatives before voters. And I do think it's worth, after more than 30 years of this program existing in the city, sort of reviewing it as the special subcommittee on the special committee of 14 wards has been doing, and I applaud my colleagues for doing so. Okay, Alderwoman Rice noted that a court order could allow us to push it back a week. That'd be a writ of mandamus, I believe. But regardless, I do wonder if, again, looking to comparable cities such as Kansas City, Missouri, if the new board and the new legislative branch of government could not approach street safety and street infrastructure through the application of ward capital funds towards street safety and streets infrastructure, if it could not be approached at a sort of at-large method of governance, which Kansas City has, where the city would be broken up into regions, equitable regions, appropriate regions. I'm very apprehensive to ever suggest breaking the city up into regions, because historically that has been used as a weapon in the city. But that would allow, it would take the pressure off one individual alderman working within very specific geographic boundaries, and allow the region of aldermen and alderwomen to look at streets infrastructure. And I don't know if that might be a feasible process for approaching this moving forward, because as my colleagues have said, and as we all very well know, we're held pretty hard and fast by these geographical boundaries when it comes to repaving roads or updating sidewalks or XYZ. And I just last week approved an $84,000 project for Loughborough, south of Carondelet, that I was able to do, thankfully, with Alderwoman Schweitzer's approval, because that's our border. And she's been very supportive of this project and a part of it since day one. But she had the opportunity to kill it had she wanted to. So I do wonder if taking a more sort of regional approach, a sort of more shared approach to this issue, because I believe it's worth defining as an issue, is something that could be done. And then finally, Alderwoman Rice actually answered some questions for me, both in the chat and both by posing her own questions. I'm just going through my little post note right quick. I do need to get bifocals, unfortunately, so thank you for bearing with me. With all that, I think that's sufficient, and I appreciate everyone for coming to speak. I appreciate everyone submitting to my questions, and Madam President, I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Thank you so much, Madam President, members of the committee. I have a lot of thoughts on ward capital, and I appreciate the time that everyone here spent to bring their ideas forward. There are a few other written comments in the drive, so I hope alders have a chance to read those as well as having heard from people here today. I spent a lot of time thinking about ward capital, and one of the things that comes up a lot is that it seems to be used as the general maintenance fund in a lot of ways. And in reality, it's not enough money to even come close to the needs of what that sort of general maintenance and infrastructure needs are in any of the wards that exist currently. For example, in the 13th ward where I represent, there's $400,000 of outstanding sidewalk work needed. This work goes back to 2018. There's not enough money in the account to even cover that. Not to mention the money that is used and allocated every single year for dumpster replacements, tree planting, random things that happen if sometimes if a barrier is hit in the ward or a fence that the city owns. There's been times when I've been approached to say, hey, this fence needs to get replaced, can you use ward capital for this? Or hey, you used the, not you, but the 13th ward in the past used ward capital to purchase and put up a speed monitor on Kings Highway, and it was damaged in a car accident, and if the 13th ward was another one, you have to use ward capital again for that. But then you ask, how is that possible? Isn't there insurance that covers this being damaged? And they say, well, even if there is, any money from that insurance claim goes to the city coffers and is not reallocated to ward capital. So I think the conversation that pins ward capital as if it were all pooled, the streets issues in St. Louis could be solved is just not a fair way of looking at it, because it's just not enough money. It barely covers routine. I mean, it doesn't cover routine maintenance in the wards that exist as they are. So it's not like, wards even in South St. Louis, like I represent, are just completely covered by ward capital and that's all it needs. And, we got all this extra money sitting around. That's not the case at all. And just in terms of the nuts and bolts of ward capital, it being distributed 28 ways for each ward, is how that specific tax is distributed. That's not how city funds in general are budgeted or allocated. And so I think that is, again, kind of an interesting way of phrasing it, as if this is the only funds that are being spent on each ward. And they definitely shouldn't be the only funds that are spent on each ward. This isn't anywhere near enough of amount to spend on each ward, as I've said a few times now. And then in thinking about the nuts and bolts of the actual moving of money in an account, the money that is the unallocated funds in a ward capital account is very simply that, unallocated. Every time an alderperson gets a ward capital report, it has a page or 2 pages or however many accounts that your ward has that shows all of the different accounts where allocated money is either sitting or how much is left in those accounts. So if you've allocated money for street improvements for a specific street, it goes into a separate account. It's not sitting in an unallocated fund because it has been allocated and it's in that account. Now, can an alderman, if that money is not spent, take money from the allocated account and move it to something else? Yes, that does take an act of E&A to do so. So it is very possible for a new alderperson to come in and say, I see there's $20,000 sitting in this allocated account for this project. I'd like to move it. And then it does have to go through a process through E&A to move it. It's not, cemented into that spot, which is important, because if the project's completed and there's money left over, you want it to be able to move from the completed project fund back into, an unallocated fund, or so it can be allocated again. As my colleagues have pointed out, sometimes you allocate the funds and then the work just kind of doesn't happen. I think one of the things, and I talked about this a little bit in our meeting in the Streets Committee yesterday, that I'm really concerned about is there's so many different things that are put on a smaller and smaller city workforce, and it is very difficult for them to manage all of these different programs. And that's not an excuse. It is a reason for things to be slowed down. It's not an excuse. And by that, I mean that it has to be fixed, but it's something that is a root cause of a lot of the problems in the city of St. Louis is staffing issues. I mean, I think we all know that. That's nothing new. The St. Louis Works Fund hasn't been allocated for the past few years because the budget, either it wasn't written, sent to the, alderperson, wasn't sent to the alderperson, just this sort of, kind of messy process, honestly, that had a lot of very important work and has a lot of very important work that's being held up through this process. So I think this ward capital discussion is sort of opening a can of worms into a lot of funding discussions that need to be had about how money from different places and different taxes and from gets to different departments and how they get that money out. and if they're getting that money out, and the role of an alder person in poking until that money goes out. I know in the 13th ward, whenever I've allocated funds, I'm sure the city employees get sick of hearing from me so much about when are these trees getting planted? When are these sidewalks getting put in? When is this road improvement happening? And I do think of that as part of the role of an alder person, because we want to see outcomes for our community. I mean, if we didn't want to see outcomes for our community, I don't know what we're doing here. So, in that way, having that kind of ability to have some influence on how money is spent in your ward is helpful, because it allows you to focus on problems that people care about. I do understand that there are problems all over the city, and I'm certainly no expert in judging this problem as this is not a problem, is a problem. I mean, I think we can all look at the conditions of roads across the city of St. Louis and know that there are certain areas of the city that need more money than other areas of the city. But again, ward capital is not, that's a Band-Aid. We have a bullet wound and we're trying to slap a Band-Aid on it. And I think that makes this conversation one that needs to be opened up even further. I think I had thought that I had asked for Board of Public Service to be here and to present to us today, so I'm hoping that that's coming soon. If we need to have something on the ballot, we need to have something on the ballot, and it's also coming soon. If it is just an ordinance to change from 28 to 14 wards, I think that is the most true to what the ballot language probably said. If there is not time to put it on the ballot to change how the wards are, just how the funds are allocated. And I'm open to all of these discussions. I just want to be realistic about what ward capital is and what it is not. And like I said, it is a Band-Aid for a bullet wound is how I feel. I've spoken with the streets department and people there, a lot of different times about, how sidewalks should be funded. Instead of through a ward capital program, it should possibly be more like the sewer lateral program, in which people are paying a small amount of money into this fund, so that when their sidewalk does need work, hey, there's just money available for it. Just like if the sewer needs work, there's money available for it and it can get done. It's not about 50-50 program. I mean, in the 50-50 program in Ward 13, the sidewalks have been sitting there since 2018, some of these sidewalks. So that owner or that property owner who may have put their sidewalk up for getting work done is now not there anymore. And if the new person gets the letter and say they don't want to do it, everyone just puts up with it going up. I mean, it's just kind of a nutty system to me anyway. So I have a lot more thoughts on ward capital, and I really look forward to further discussions. And I'm just so grateful for the time, and I yield back.
Thank you. Alderman Gross.
Does Alderman Vaccaro, do you have like a?
I'll go back to
Okay.
people who have already spoken after.
Okay. No, I didn't know if you had like a procedure thing. Yeah, no, this is an important discussion, and I think that the points here are right on. I know that there was one of our members of the public, made a comment earlier that they didn't know if the aldermans that represent wards like the 28th would necessarily think that this seemed inequitable. And I'm the 28th ward alderman, and I absolutely think this seems inequitable. And I think that besides all the historical reasons and these reasons that we kind of talk about a lot about why ward capital isn't equitable, I think you also have to realize that a lot of places in the city, like my ward, also have special taxing districts that pick up the tab on a lot of things themselves, and they have institutional partners that pick up the tabs on a lot of things themselves as well. So I mean, the idea that the other thing, my ward has a lot more people in it, or it's not a lot more people, but it's denser. So it's smaller geography. There's even less infrastructure because there's smaller square miles to pay. So this system needs reform, and it's not working. And I agree with the alderwoman from the 13th that that I think this is one part of how we spend infrastructure, and one part of how we plan it. But this is by no means, we fix this and we do it. And I think that's also the problem is, what's really ward capital, what's the stuff that, the city does. But I think the most important point though that I want to make is that, I don't necessarily think the answer though is to, okay, well, we're going to keep the same system and give other wards more money and give some wards less money. I agree with the comments that, this should go to the streets, this should go, central planning, maybe not all of it, but a large portion of it. And what I would also say is that, the things that we would want to keep still as part of ward capital or some sort of, aldermanic discretionary kind of, system where, we agree that, people that represent the community know certain things and needs, we should clarify what kinds of things that we'd be looking for alders to be doing and what we don't. And one of the things that I think is just terrible is that alders have to pay for maintenance and upkeep out of ward capital for things. I mean, it's just, no one wants to think of ourselves like, oh, we only do things for votes and we're political creatures stuff. But I think that it is just natural that, people are incentivized to want to build new things. And, oh, I have ward capital and, I know I have some other people that want something new and something different. If you're wanting to prioritize trying to like maybe put speed humps in because, you're wanting to make a positive impact, well, then you're taking money away from, roads that, it's like, okay, this road's looking kind of bad, but, some people are kind of complaining and then, but it doesn't look maybe as bad as wanting to decide to spend money on it something else. I mean, it's just the idea that alders are having to weigh like routine paving and upkeep alongside of, do some trees need to go here? Do some pedestrian lighting projects need to go here? I think that is over time, no matter what we think of ourselves as people, I think over time is you're going to see just that neglect is going to take place because people aren't going to do the upkeep until it's broken, really. So, I think we're at a point right now where, it would be great if we could make some sort of change now. I know that this is probably a very large project to try to rush through, to say, oh, we're going to completely redo, infrastructure spending right now. But at the same time, I think now is as good as time as any. And I think that, we have an opportunity with word reduction stuff to maybe, take a chance. So I guess I'm agreeing with my comments, and to kind of, wrap it up, I think that, we need to substantially reduce the scope of things that ward capital is used for. Maybe not completely eliminate it at all. Maybe alders should still be able to have some fun where they can do some community improvement projects in their ward that are, make our city as, the extra flair, right? Like, the city should be paving the roads and everything like that. Maybe we have a little bit of discretionary money to improve our community in the way that our community wants to see it. But, beyond that, oh, and then I think the other important point though about this too is, and the alderman from the 12th, I think, made a really good point about, public administrators doing the role as elected officials, and vice versa. And besides, kind of like the conflict parts and various things that, what I'm kind of going over, it's just so inefficient that, to do anything, you need to get, you can get a hold of the alderman, and it's like you have to explain everything to the alderman, and then you have to get approvals from these groups and this group. And I think that when we're looking at reforming ward capital, if we can, when we do it, we have to look at it, with an eye toward equity first, but then B, we have to make spending money in this system, in this city, easier to do, more efficient to do, we have, and I know this is a different conversation, but we have all this ARPA money that we need to spend. And, BPS, taking every project individually, bidding out a design, bidding out contracting, every project kind of handled separately and piecemeal is makes it very hard to do anything. And it really reduces our capacity as a city to do anything. So, if we could reform the way we spend money in the city to be able to, contract like big design build projects all at once, and big parts of the city all kind of get paved at once, et cetera. I think that it reduced costs, if we can get bids more consolidated, and not have to do project by project, ward by ward, and et cetera. So there's so many reasons to change this. I can't think of hardly any to keep the status quo, besides just that it's a lot of work and there's a lot going on right now, which is a terrible reason to not do it. So I hope we can try to work and try to get something done now. And the only other thing I would say is, obviously we need to follow the law, and however we need to get this done, if it needs to go to a vote of the people, because that's what the law requires, then that's what the law requires. But if it doesn't go to the vote of the people, maybe this is a controversial opinion, but I don't think we owe the voters from 30 years ago anything here, as far as that there was a vote here that devised the system. And now the system, if we're all agreeing that this needs to change, it's not in the charter. Our charter sets up an elegant system of what our ordinances, what are the types of things that the alder people can do, and what are the types of things that the voters need to do. And if this would comply with that, I don't think we need to say, well, it has to go back to the voters, just kind of as a nicety to the voters from 30 years ago. So I would just err on the side of getting things done as opposed to not. I think that's all I have to say. So appreciate the comments and appreciate the work everyone's doing on this. Thank you.
All right. Alderwoman Walker, any other comments?
Yes, Madam President, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that the committee or subcommittee, excuse me, was not saying that it wanted to overlook the will of the public, that we were saying that we just needed to take a look at the ordinance and then reach out to our legal counsel to find out how we can get those things done. So just clarification. I yield.
Right. Alderman Vaccaro.
I had a couple things, and then one thing I wanted to add after Alderman Grass's comment. I am one of those voters from 30 years ago, so I think the city owes me what I voted for, along with anyone else that has lived in the city their whole life that has voted on these issues. And I think that's a terrible thing to say. I think it's terrible. The reason I rose my hand, let me get my thoughts because I got a little mad there. One of the things that ward capital is used for, and I use for, is matching funds. In where the area Alderman Bill Stephen represents, that major street was done with matching funds. Lose those matching funds in our parks, will not get the work that they needed. I will also, Alderwoman Rice's thoughts. You have, just like every ward right now, has over $300,000 in city works that has not even been allocated yet. It's 3 years because of some paperwork stuff that didn't come over from, I guess, as the mayor's office changed and didn't get through streets, and it's there now. But there's 3 years of that money sitting there waiting that is going to come up probably shortly. I'm more interested in that because it's not going to be allocated to any project. I mean, we're talking about ward capital, but I can tell you that St. Louis Works or City Works, however you want to say it, that money is going to pop up and is not allocated by anything. But one of the things I agree with Alderwoman Schweitzer, that this is really doesn't help. It at least helps get, you know, we have paved our major streets to the best we can. Our neighborhood association gets together. They're the ones who decide. My ward has the least amount of money. We only have $11,000 because we get together. I'm waiting for $200,000 worth of sidewalk work to get done. It's funded. It's just sitting there. I'm told that the comptroller's office, that all these things, these projects are sitting in there and nothing's moving through there. I don't know if that's true or not. I brought that up in streets yesterday, but so you were asking about the City Works versus the ward capital. Your City Works funding has not been available to your ward, mine, or any other ward in the city for the last 2 years, plus this year, which is 3 years. So each ward has over $300,000 whenever it gets finished up and through, which won't be allocated. What I'm finding interesting is, are they going to go against the voters on that and take that back? Anyway, that was my train of thought until Alderman Grass told me that my vote didn't count 30 years ago. And for that, I hope every senior, not even senior, because you don't have to be that old to have voted 30 years ago. Please don't disregard us. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say, because otherwise, you know, I'm just not happy with that comment. But I just wanted to let you know that, you know, we keep talking about the ward capital. When the City Works is going to pop up completely unencumbered by anything. That should be interesting. Anyway, that's my thoughts.
Alderman Stevens.
Oh, thank you, Madam President. Just as a follow-up, and in part to Ms. Coxshell's question about, or statement that we need to be educating the public as to what the role of ward capital and streets and so on and so forth and City Works funds are. As I work on which anyone's able to join, I'm just going to say, as I work on the new Board 2.0 guide, working title, I do think it would be worthwhile to have a section on sort of ward capital and City Works funds with both a history and sort of the operation of it. But I would pose to the subcommittee on ward capital, as well as the special committee on the transition to 14 wards, whether or not it is both feasible and prudent to perhaps solicit public questions through, say, a Google form or just a sort of informal but widespread soliciting of what the public's questions are regarding ward capital or regarding, I mean, really any part of this process that we're undertaking, so that we can incorporate those into the final new Board 2.0 guide. So I merely wanted to pose that as a question and a thought piece for all of us here at the board, whether or not it is both feasible with the time we still have remaining and prudent to solicit public questions informally through means that we've used previously for, say, redistricting or so forth, in order to hear directly from our citizens what questions they have and to thus provide answers to those questions by way of this finalizing document that I and whomever wishes to join am working on. So with that, Madam President, I yield back with gratitude.
Thank you. Alderwoman Rice.
Hi, thanks so much. I will be quick. One thing I wanted to flag, I think Alderwoman from the 13th raised this trees. Street trees, I don't want to lose sight of this. It's something that for our environmental and sustainable goals to keep the city as cool as possible and potentially increasing temperatures and things that we, if we are going to reallocate these funds, that we find a specific line item that we're able to fund as many street trees as possible, replacements and new plantings, because those are the things that are going to help keep our city livable in a new climate. So just want to flag that. And caring for those trees would also be great to fund, not just planting, but making sure that they stay healthy and maintained in ways that aren't hurting people in the process. The second item, I did drop in the chat, I believe the most recent ordinance authorizing this half-cent sales tax from 1993. I'll let folks take a look at that. The ballot language itself does not seem to reference equal provisions to 28 wards. There are some provisions as far as allocation that do reference the 28 wards, but I think it would be unfair to say that it was that voters voted that each ward should receive an equal portion of this fund. So, and I do want to say, also, our city is in a very different place than we were in 1993. Our needs are very different than they were in 1993. Our population has changed. Our modes of transportation have changed. The Americans with Disabilities Act and the requirements that we create mobility and safety for people who are using assistive devices has changed in that time. And if we need to update things to make our city safer for people, then I think we owe it to our citizens to do that. And even, these reckless criminal driving trends that we've seen even in these last 2-3 years, that has changed. And so if whatever it is that we need to do, respectful of the fact that this half-cent sales tax did go to the vote back in 1993, we need to make the improvements that keep our people safe. So I don't think it's disrespectful in the spirit of what was offered back then to do that. So, but that is a bigger debate. But I just wanted to throw that in. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alderwoman Rice. Just going to close with a couple of things. I'm sorry, our public testimony is completed for today. But if you have additional comments, feel free to please email them to us and they will go to the entire committee. So from what I've heard from committee members today, it seems like we need some more information in a couple areas. If Gally could please be putting together for us kind of an analysis on what authority, what changes we could make in terms of redistributing those funds, whether they be equitably or to the streets department, what authority we would have to do that without going to the ballot and what would have to go to the ballot. I think we need a determination on that pretty quickly. As Alderwoman Rice did put in the chat before, you can petition a judge, and if we need to put something on the ballot, have the potential to do it 8 weeks out instead of 10 weeks out. But if we determine that that is a necessity, then we would have to get this introduced next week, and we would probably have to call a special meeting in order to meet that deadline as well. So I think we need some clarity on this as quickly as possible on whether changes to this need to be taken to a vote or not. I think the other thing we need to do, unfortunately, Rich Bradley was not able to clear some conflicts to be here today. And I understand that there are quite a few questions for him and for BPS. And so I would advocate that for next week's meeting, let's see if we can get Rich Bradley to come, and we will, in addition to talking about BOA staffing next week, we'll also revisit some of this conversation on ward capital when we have a little bit more information on legal challenges, and also hopefully have Rich here from BPS to answer some further questions. So if there's nothing else from committee members for today, are there any announcements from committee members? Okay, we need to excuse members. I think the folks that are absent today are Alderwoman Boyd, Alderwoman Davis, is that correct? So I would entertain a motion to excuse the aforementioned alder people from the meeting today.
So moved.
Second.
It was motion by the Alderman from
Previous role.
23rd, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 8th, 20th. There was a call for previous roll. Any objection? Seeing none, motion passes. We'll entertain a motion to adjourn for today.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 23rd, seconded from the Alderman from the 12th, that we adjourn for today. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. We will see you at 11 a.m. next Thursday.